Oh, hello there, everybody. How you doing? Um, Dan here. How you doing? Let's take that off for now. All right. So, what are we doing today? We are going to talk about Superman. That's right, the brand new Superman trailer. Um, hey Ed, good to see you. So what's the basic plan here? They dropped the trailer. It is pretty good. I got to tell you, I've seen a lot of people reacting to it like they absolutely loved the trailer, and I liked it, but I didn't get that excitement out of it that I hoped I would. I didn't come out of it going, "Oh my God, I can't wait to see that. That is just amazing." And there's nothing wrong with it. I can't sit there and go, "Oh, I didn't like this, I didn't like that." And let me start by saying I am not a Snyder bro. I'm also not anti-Snyder. There were some things about Man of Steel I liked. I like Henry Cavill. If they would have kept him on, I would have been fine with that. But they've moved on. They've gone into a new direction. And I don't have a problem with that either, because that's what studios do. And if you think about it, the Snyder movies didn't really do all that well. I mean, Man of Steel only made 209 or 29 $291 million. It's not a lot. I mean, Suicide Squad outdid that. And Man of Steel outdid Justice League. Now, Batman, Superman, Dawn of Justice did 330, but bottom line is those films just didn't do that well. The Batman did 369 million. This is all domestic numbers. But, them wanting to start over, I don't see a problem with. Especially if you want to go with a younger cast. I can see that. Don't have a problem with it. So I'm not one to be down on this just because it's not Henry Cavill or it's not Zack Snyder. And like I said, I wouldn't have had a problem if they would have stayed with that universe. There were some good things. There were some bad things. Wonder Woman 84, the second Shazam, did not like the Flash movie. Was not a fan of Ezra Miller as the Flash. Was not necessarily a fan of Ray Fisher as Cyborg. Not that he was bad, but I don't think he really added much. So, but again, a lot of that might be the writing. So, new Superman. New phone, who dis? Now, I'm trying to decide, should we do a breakdown of it as it goes, or should I just talk about? I think we'll do a bit of a breakdown of it. Let me bring it up here, and we're going to start the trailer and stop it, whatnot. But the main thing I want to do is.
Are you being serious right now?
Yeah.
You'd let me interview you as Superman. Sure.
I don't think that's going to work.
Ready?
Let's do it, Cronkite.
Superman.
I used to be good at that.
Miss Lane.
All right, let me stop that. Yeah, I used to be good at that. Don't know what happened. Let's try it like this. See if running it this way will work.
Recently, you've come under a lot of fire for what some might. It's a lot.
Yeah, see, anytime I come over here, I lose it. All right.
Secretary of Defense said he was going to look.
I'm not good at that anymore. I've lost my magic. Lost my mojo. Oh, well. Okay, so let's just talk about the movie. Now, the trailer starts, of course, with Lois and Clark talking, and I love this scene. And from what I understand, this is a long scene in the movie. This is going to be like a 12, 15-minute scene in the movie. Now, I would be surprised if it's not a cutaway where they're talking, but at the same time, we're seeing cuts to what's going on during the war that he stops. I'd be surprised if we didn't do that. It'd be kind of boring just to stay on the two for 15 minutes, but they do that and can pull it off. That's excellent. But to me, it's interesting that we're getting to see. I've seen some backlash to this scene. It says that whole stop the war angle seems like they're going for a Sokovia Accords type deal, trying to keep Superman accountable to someone. Yeah, I think you're right. But let me give you my thoughts on that. But first, I wanted to talk about the scene with him getting upset. Now, a lot of people have said, well, Superman shouldn't get that upset. Superman should remain calm. And I will tell you that in my life, I have been in some pretty tense situations. Things involving guns pointed at me, and I've been able to keep my cool. Had someone trying to rob the store I was working at and had a gun pulled on me, and literally just stood there, told the guy, look, I'm as big as a frickin' bear. If you don't kill me in one shot, I'm going to rip your head off. And I made the guy run out of the store. So I can be cool in situations. Talking to either my ex-wife or my girlfriend, either Debbie or Lisa, they could rattle me. They could get me really upset. They can push my buttons. So it is completely understandable to me that Lois Lane is able to push his buttons because he's not really being Superman at that moment. She's being Lois Lane. She's being true to herself. He's being true to himself in the sense that he gets frustrated. He sees people doing these horrible things and he gets frustrated. And now the woman he loves is questioning his actions, is questioning whether or not it was right for him to go in to stop people from dying. And that frustrates him. So his reaction, the line, people were going to die, and with how much force he said that, makes perfect sense to me. That is one of the better parts of the trailer. That and the scene where he gets thrown into the ground and one of the innocent bystanders, just, city people just try to help him up, get him back to his feet. All right. So what's going on with the war? The other big thing, and Lisa pointed this out, is the movie seems very busy. There's a kaiju, there's Metamorpho, there's that weird set of prison cells, there's the Justice Gang or whatever they're called, there's the Hammer of Barovia, there's Ultraman, there's the Engineer, there's Lex Luthor, there's Crypto, there's a ton of stuff going on. But what makes sense is if all of that is connected. Ed says, I really enjoyed seeing him talk as Superman. Help me affirm that he's going to be a good Superman. Yeah. When he leans forward and says, Miss Lane, it's like there's the Superman voice. But all right. So if all of these things are connected, I want you to think about a James Bond movie. Okay? In a James Bond movie, you have James. And you have the Bond girl of the movie. you have the main villain, whether it's Blofeld or Goldfinger or Scaramouche or whatever it is. Then you have henchmen for the villain. But then you have other agencies like Felix Leiter, part of the CIA. Okay, so you got a lot of things going on there. But all of them work towards the main goal of giving us a James Bond movie. Well, this is aimed towards Superman movie. So let's take, first off, the Justice Gang is just like Felix Leiter in this. They're there to show another side of heroes, and this happens to be the corporate heroes, you know, where Felix Leiter always showed how the Americans dealt with things as opposed to the British. Here you have an independent superhero raised in Kansas, farm-fed, all of that, versus a corporate-backed, sponsored team. That's why they're there. We're not going to get a lot of backstory. There's not going to be a big explanation on whether this is Shiera from Ran or this is Shiera from ancient Egypt, or Shiera from Thanagar. Shouldn't say Ran. That's a touchy subject. We're just going to get the fact that this is Hawkgirl. We're going to get a Green Lantern. By now, we're supposed to know what a Green Lantern is. We should know what a Green Lantern is. Intergalactic Peace Corps. Okay. Mr. Terrific. Third smartest guy on the planet. Don't need to spend a lot of time with them. If they get their own movie, then we'll spend time with them. Maybe they get a TV show. But I don't think we're going to spend much time with them. Metamorpho. Metamorpho, I think we will get time with. Because Metamorpho, I think, is the unwilling stooge of Lex Luthor. You know, the guy that gets forced into helping the bad guy. Now, I would say that Lex is working with the U.S. government to control threats. He's got this little prison he's built. It's where he wants to put Superman. It's where he keeps Metamorpho. And he knows that he can use Metamorpho to contain Superman because he's got him in there. So he's got Metamorpho with the giant, ability to change his hand to any element. He becomes Kryptonite. Put him in the cell with Superman. You've got a docile Superman. There's also the scene we see him punching out of the cell and a bright light. I'm thinking at that point, can the elemental man turn into solar energy, red sun energy, or yellow sun energy? If so, maybe Superman convinces Metamorpho he's on the wrong side. But I don't think that's all with Metamorpho. I still think, and I have thought this since the initial trailer, that Metamorpho is also the kaiju. Because how do you explain a giant kaiju? Where did he come from? Stuff like that. Well, if he's Metamorpho, you don't have to explain him. You just have to explain Metamorpho. Now, I know what the question is. Well, wait, can Metamorpho become a kaiju? We've never seen him do that. Well, that part's true. He's never done it in the comics. I checked. There is no comic history of Metamorpho becoming a giant kaiju. What there is he has the ability to expand his body as well as change it. You see it, he'll suddenly make his fist into a giant hammer, stuff like that. So I think it's possible that he can transform his body into the size of a kaiju. If you look at the kaiju, he has these very bright blue eyes. They're the same bright blue eyes we see for Metamorpho. Also, the coloring around the neck and skin, or the head and neck of Metamorpho, has that same coloring that we see in the kaiju. So I'm convinced they're the same thing. And again, if that is who becomes the kaiju, then you don't have to explain where the freaking kaiju comes from. And all you've got to do is say Lex is doing that. Lex made him turn into a kaiju and attack one of his rivals. He's attacking Lord Tech. Now, maybe he's attacking to bring out the Justice Gang. Maybe this is Luthor's attempt to make the Justice Gang look bad. Discredit them. And Superman gets involved. Maybe Superman's not even on Lex's radar at that point, but he stops this giant kaiju, becomes a hero, everybody starts loving him, and Lex can't handle that. So he starts going out of his way to discredit Superman, including using his tech and stuff in a hotspot in the Middle East to start a war. Also to use his tech to create a hero for one of the sides, the Hammer of Barovia. So I think almost everything that Superman's going to have to deal with is to force him to be discredited in the eyes of the people. Lex doesn't want to kill Superman. He wants to replace him. He wants the world to look at him as the hero and Superman as the threat. He wants everyone to hate Superman. And he does this by putting Superman in situations where he's interrupting in a sovereign country. He's becoming a threat to the U.S. government, stuff like that. That's why the government ends up arresting him. I think they're all pushing towards him becoming a threat. And I think that's Lex's plan. And when he finds out about the Fortress of Solitude, he wants to get in there. There's a ship in it at one point. Maybe he's going to try to make it. If you guys have read Superman Birthright by Mark Waid, I believe it is, that's similar plot. And Birthright is one of the books that James Gunn has talked about as being an inspiration for the series, along with All-Star Superman, and I don't remember what the third book is, but so I think Ultraman, who's probably a clone of Superman, and all of this stuff, I think it's going to be a series of events from Lex to discredit Superman and get him arrested and get him in the cage where he can control him. He probably learns all this stuff from the Fortress of Solitude. He probably follows Superman back to the Fortress of Solitude after the fight with the kaiju. And, he's able to clone Superman from he probably gets some blood cells. He probably finds out what kryptonite is on his visit to the fortress. So that's my thoughts with that. And you know what? I like this idea. It says, do you think the robot-looking guy fighting Superman is Lex in the battle armor? No. I think that's going to be an early version of Ultraman. If not, something like that. But I will say this. There is, and this is massive spoiler potential, but supposedly there's a toy out there. And you know how toys are always the early leader in leaks. Supposedly there's a toy out there that has a Lex Luthor in a battlesuit. But no, I don't think at that point he would put on the costume as the Hammer of Barovia. If Lex puts on the battlesuit, it's going to be with you knowing it's him. He wants you to know it's him. And he doesn't want to be symbolized for another country. He wants to be the hero. He wants to shake things up and take Superman's place. So, yeah. Do I think it's possible he'll put on a suit? Yeah. Do I think it'll be the Barovia suit? No. So, I still think that's an early version of Ultraman the Clone because there's a heat ray type thing or a blast, and I think that's part of that. So, heat vision. So where I think there's a lot of components, I think all of it's going to come back to being tied to Lex. The engineer is going to be somebody who believed that Lex was doing good, and it will end up turning coat at some point so that she can end up being part of the Authority. There'll be a final showdown with the Ultraman character. The government will be involved, but eventually will step aside. And like I said, Lex will end up being the big bad guy. Now, I think if they do that, it'll take care of the fact that it's an extremely crowded movie because all of those pieces work towards the main plot. But if they're like, oh, he just happened to fight a kaiju and he just happened to stop a war, then there's a lot more explaining you got to do, and it makes it a much bigger movie. As I said, have you seen anything so far that gives you hope for a real Lex Luthor instead of real estate obsessed mogul? Yes. Yeah, because I think that's what he's doing. I think they're treating Lex as the malignant narcissist that he is, a narcissistic personality disorder. I think his focus is going to be on discrediting and destroying Superman and not just a get-rich-quick scheme. You know, and that fits into what I'm seeing in the trailer. I'm seeing a Lex Luthor that becomes furious that the world is focused on Superman. You know, that it has nothing to do with Lex trying to become more rich or anything like that, or even trying to get more power. He wants to be beloved by the world. That's a narcissistic personality disorder. And I think James Gunn has got it right finally. So I would be surprised if a real estate thing even pops up. I mean, come on. That was so overdone and just a horrible waste of a character. You know, I look back at the Christopher Reeve Superman. And Christopher Reeve was great as Superman. But it was such a movie of its time. It had camp. There was some campiness to it. There was some silliness to it. And it makes it hard for me to rewatch. I can't watch sitcoms because, you know, when I see stupid people doing stupid things, I can't watch it. So I have a hard time going back and rewatching Superman. The interview scene gives me a lot of hope that we're not going to see at least much of Clark Kent, the bumbling idiot. I don't want that. I know it's his disguise, but there are so many things that they can do. There's that deleted scene in the original Superman movie, I think it's, or maybe it's Superman 2, where he's telling Lois that he's Superman. And he's standing there with the glasses on, and his posture is kind of hunched forward. And when he's decided it's time to tell her he's Superman, his back straightens up, his posture straightens, he takes his glasses off, his voice deepens, and now he's Superman. But now he's also the real Kal-El, the real, Clark Kent. He's not the act. And I think they can do that without having to do the way over the top, tripping on things, knocking things over. I'm hoping they avoid that. I'm hoping they don't feel they need that over the top pantomime like show. So, hey, audience, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. He's pretending to be. The audience isn't stupid. You don't need to do that. Please don't do that. Yeah. So I like that. I also hope they don't go. I mean, Gunn is good at getting laughs, but not necessarily at people's expense. I mean, sure, he had fun with Star-Lord in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, but it wasn't. It was not too far into the sitcom range, and I'm hoping that's here too. He did a couple things, but overall, you could still see the humor, and it didn't dwell on it. So I'm hoping that he tones the humor down here a bit, because this is a different movie. And I completely believe he's capable of that. I don't think every James Gunn movie is the same. I don't think every James Gunn project is the same tone, is the same any more than my writing. If I'm doing something for Ethereal, I'm doing Morgana, or I'm doing Crimson Sails, that's very different than the Freeze or the Lucius Fogg books or anything like that. And I think Gunn is that way too. I think he can do something a little more funny, something a little more serious. And I look forward to that. Because I got to say, I don't think I've seen a bad James Gunn movie. Now, I haven't seen all of them. I haven't watched his trauma stuff. I haven't watched much of his horror stuff because that's not really my gig. But from what I have seen of his work, I think he can do it. I think he knows when to be serious. When, if you were in the theater or sitting on your couch and you started to tear up because of a raccoon who couldn't go off and fly the skies with his animal friends, then you got to be with me on the fact that James Gunn can do this. So, all right. Any questions you guys got about Superman trailer? I am looking forward to this. I think one of the scenes that people seem to really like and that threw me off that I didn't necessarily like was Ma Kent saying, "I cleaned your boots. I'll go get them for you." I'm not sure about... I see where James Gunn's coming from. He's trying to make Ma and Pa Kent really from Missouri. He's trying to make them more realistic. What we get in the comics and what we got on television is almost like the romanticized version of farmers. They're big strapping men, and women are salt of the earth, but they could be on the cover of GQ if in the right circumstances. It's, the nice farmhouse. Well, James Gunn has said that you go to Missouri, the farmhouses are usually like expanded out double wide trailers. They're not these big houses, stuff like that, with separate barns. And so I get where he's coming from on that. But at the same time, that's what we've always seen. So it's kind of hard to step away from that, you know? That would be like, I don't know, Wayne Manor not being a big castle like building. If it turns out Wayne Manor was just, a penthouse. And they did that in the second Batman Dark Knight movie. But that was because Wayne Manor got destroyed. But if that, he just, Batman in a building, it wouldn't feel right, would it? It would make sense if Gotham is this, bustling city of crime and corruption. There probably wouldn't be a lot of big rich people houses. But still, it just kind of, it would be weird not to have it. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking on this stuff. Ed says, as a horror nut, I can vouch for James Gunn's Dawn of the Dead. Cool. Didn't he do a movie that was kind of an evil take on Superman, Brightborn or something? I don't know. I have a lot of faith in Gunn. I see how he handles characters that are kind of silly. And he leans into it. He leans into the Golden Age stuff. But at the same time, he understands the heart of the characters. And I think that's the key. If you understand what makes Superman tick, then you can do a Superman movie. But so many people don't get Superman. And I don't think the writers of Man of Steel really understood what makes Superman work. Yeah, Brightburn. Superman's a tough character. In a way, he's kind of like Captain America. And Marvel got Captain America right by leaving him in the 1940s to start and doing an entire movie set during the war. Because Steve Rogers in that war makes sense. His sensibilities, his ethics, his morality, the way he did things, becoming a soldier, but also believing in the good of people, stuff like that. Those are harder to find in a world that has become much more selfish. Superman is like that. So it wouldn't make sense to me, or how they did Man of Steel didn't make a lot of sense to me, because the advice from Jonathan Kent made no sense. Kevin Costner's character made no sense. How he died, why he died, none of that made sense. So where I like Henry Cavill, and there was a lot of cool action and stuff, I don't think they got the heart of Superman right. And I think when you don't get the heart of Superman right, nothing clicks. And I think that's why the Martha thing fell apart in Batman v Superman. That's not the worst idea in the world, to have Batman stagger when somebody says, save Martha, the name of his mother. especially from someone that you look at as completely alien and foreign. But because we really don't connect to Superman on a human level, it doesn't connect when Batman does. So Ed says, any more thoughts on what the glowing ball meteor is out in the sky? I noticed in the trailer too, you think it's a multiverse rip or a time rip or something? No. And I'll tell you why. And it could, I mean, you could be right. I'm saying no because, again, you've got to remember they have a story they're trying to tell. James Gunn is not just going to throw the kitchen sink in here to build the universe. Everything that he puts in, I believe, is there for a reason. I think the glowing ball in the sky is probably another creation of Lex's. And with what we're seeing there, my guess is that Superman is ordered by the U.S. government not to be involved, to not be able to do superheroic things. This thing attacks. He wants to go out there, and Lois stops him. Lois tells them there are other heroes. Let them do it. Because we see, it looks like out the window, Guy Gardner and the rest of the Justice Gang are fighting it. And I think this might be something to try to get Superman to come out and do something to make the government arrest him. And that might be what happens. You know, that might be what sends the government after him as he goes too far. After he's ordered to not do things, you know, he tries to wait, he tries to let the Justice Gang handle it, and then he goes out. But again, I think the threats Superman are going to face in this are going to all end up tying back to Lex Luthor. Now, they might say that's Solaris, you know, or that's some kind of black hole that Lex, you know, taps into or something. But again, I think it's all going to fit back into Lex trying to push Superman's buttons to discredit him. And says, agreed, nothing against Cavill, but they had him play Superman so angry and serious all the time, even as Clark. This one looks more like Superman. Yeah. One of the best things in the Snyder stuff was Superman racing against Barry Allen, against the Flash, and basically telling them that if he loses, he's out of the league. That's him messing around. That's him having fun. Superman should have fun. Superman should be able to make jokes. They're not supposed to be great jokes. They shouldn't be like super on-the-spot witticisms. But he should have fun like a Kansas farm boy should. So, it says, one thing I'm hoping for is a director's cut edition with commentary. I really like to know what Gunn's inspiration was for the suit. And the suit just looks weird, so wondering what his process was. I think Gunn normally does commentary. Let's see, Guardians 3, director's commentary. So, as recent as the latest Guardians movie, he's doing director's commentary. And Gunn likes to talk about his stuff. So, I would be stunned not to see a director's commentary. But, yeah, I look forward to. I enjoy it. I still buy the physical media so I can get all that stuff. I just got Captain America Brave New World, which I have yet to watch. But as soon as I watch it, then I'm going to watch all the behind the scenes stuff. So I was going to try to watch it this weekend, but got tied up with stuff, did some writing. I'm trying to build, this guy, my X-Wing, it's from Bandai. They do those little kits, snap together kits. There's one for the Batmobile from the Batman. And I got it for my birthday. And I absolutely loved that muscle car looking Batmobile. And I started building it. And I got to a point that I'm freaking stuck. Might be my old eyes, my giant hands, but I'm absolutely stuck. So my nephew, who builds stuff too, the one that got me into Warhammer, he'll be over probably next week, and he's going to help me get past those steps so I can finish the damn car. But yeah, so that's how I spent my weekend. But yeah, I'm going to watch that. I still need to watch the last 6 episodes of season 2 of Andor. I love the first 6. Just haven't had a chance. We've been watching so many weird shows and stuff. It says, I just wonder what inspired that look. I don't hate it. It seems off for a Superman suit. I'm mixed on it. Because I've never thought Superman should be in a skin-tight suit. Especially since his mother made it. Or Martha Kent sewed it. I don't think he would be in a skin-tight suit. So I'm not a big fan of the red trunks, but I don't think this suit would look good without the red trunks. I'll say that. I think Man of Steel lost the fact that it was supposed to be made by his mother because of, it's a Kryptonian suit. And that made sense, but I kind of like the suit. It's growing on me. Didn't like it in some of the early photos, set photos, but I like it in the trailer, so we'll have to see. The neck's a little weird. Like when he flies up and he goes, hey, buddy, eyes up here. The neck on that looks kind of weird. Maybe they still need to do a little more CG on it. I don't know. But so I'm with you on that. If you don't mind me asking, how have you been doing? Feeling better? I am feeling better. But just don't have the energy that I used to. And a lot of it has to do with, as some of you know, I had an issue with my legs. I had something called cellulitis. It was untreated for a very long time. And it wasn't for lack of trying. I noticed it in January of 2022. See a podiatrist regularly. He told me I needed to go to my regular doctor because I was going to need to go to a wound care center or something. Went to my regular doctor in February and got referred to a wound care center, or he put in to send me to a wound care center and gave me a bunch of antibiotics to deal with it. And the insurance company kind of jerked me around. They sent me to a dermatologist. Saw the dermatologist for a few visits, and he was like, and he never even looked at the wounds, but he just told me how to treat them because he didn't want to take the bandages off that I had on. So did that then he finally took a look after like a month and a half of seeing him. He goes, this is more than I can handle. You need to go to a wound care center. He tried to send me to one. Insurance company decided to send me to a surgeon. Went and saw the surgeon who had me describe the wounds to him. Never looked at them. Decided there wasn't really much he could do. Said I needed to go to a wound care center. This was now the end of May. And by this time, it was my mother and I living alone. My mother's 80 years old, and she's changing my bandages for me because it's hard to reach my legs. And by the time, the next thing that happened is beyond gross, but it involved the emergency room and things getting into my wounds. And by that time, after they kept, you know, I ended up in the hospital for a while, and they started taking it seriously. They had a wound care specialist deal with me in the hospital, recommended it. I got out, and the insurance wanted to send me to another surgeon. When I said I've already seen not only a surgeon, I've seen that surgeon, they sent me to a plastic surgeon who, don't get me wrong, plastic surgeons tend to be wound care specialists as well. There's a similarity there. Went and saw him. He's like, I can't see you in my practice, and I don't have a wound care I work with, so you need to go to a wound care center. And their nurse told me all the things I need to say to the insurance company to get them in there. And one of them was the word lawsuit. And after 6 months of trying, I ended up going to a wound care center, and my legs were in horrible condition, and they're still healing. And part of it is keeping them elevated a lot, keeping them from, not doing a lot of walking. But in doing so, not doing a lot of walking, you kind of stop being able to do a lot of walking. So my legs have improved immensely, but they're not healed yet. It's been 3 years. Still coming along. I go to a wound care center every Monday. I have a nurse come out and change bandages every Friday. But they're coming along. So I'm hoping to get to the point where they completely close up within the next 6 months or so, and I start building my strength back up, start walking again, and start building my stamina. So probably a long answer to a simple question, but there you go. Thank you, Ed. I appreciate that, sir. That was the other question. One of the first episodes of Superman and Lois, when he first appears and saves someone, a kid yells, "I love your suit." Superman's mom says, "Thanks. My mom made it for me." Yep. Yeah. See, there needs to be that homegrown aspect to Superman. He's never supposed to be Batman with the highest tech gadgets and stuff. So I'm going into this movie with the openest of minds. I'm going to let James Gunn do what he does. What he did with Suicide Squad, what he did with Peacemaker, what he did with Guardians of the Galaxy. 3 movies and a Christmas special. I have never come out of a James Gunn thing disappointed. I want DC to thrive. I want them to be toe-to-toe with Marvel. I want the box office to read Marvel, Disney, Marvel, DC, Marvel, DC, Marvel, DC. What's the top box office this year? Well, there's a Superman movie, a Batman movie, a new Avengers, and a Captain America. I mean, that's what I want. Because as a kid, I grew up loving comics, and I didn't care if they were Marvel or DC. Now, they didn't cross over, but I didn't have a favorite. I picked up the comic and read the story, and I knew these guys were in this universe, those guys were in that universe, and I didn't compare and contrast because they were different universes, and I was good with that. So I want Marvel to be successful. I want Fantastic Four to break $1 billion, and I want Superman to break $1 billion. I want Sony or whoever has the license to it to fire up the Valiant universe and get more of those out. Build off a Bloodshot or start over, don't care. Hell, I'll write them for you, call me. But I want them to work. Um, I love superhero universes. You know, when the new universe came out from Marvel years and years ago, I was buying all those comics. When Malibu put out their universe, and then Marvel ended up buying it. Had Card Case and Nightman and stuff like that. Absolutely loved it because it was a new universe of interacting characters. That's awesome to me, and I want them to succeed. Just like I want Warhammer movies to work and Warcraft movies to work, because these are the franchises I love. So of course I want them to do well on the big screen. I want the Harry Potter movies to do well. There's no movie out there that I want to see bomb, you know? Because if they do well, that's better. If the industry is doing well, we get more movies. We get more of the characters that we grew up with and love. So, did you see everything coming out in July? Jurassic World, Soups, Fantastic Four, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Do you think that's going to keep box office numbers down? Wow. No, because I think it's going to be a hot summer. I think people are going to spend time in the theaters. I think AMC just announced there's going to be a discount day. I think that's going to help a lot, especially in this economy. So I think a lot of these movies will get big bumps on that day. I think they need to start spreading these movies out a little bit more. But I look at those movies. Jurassic World, Soups, Fantastic Four, I Know What You Did Last Summer. They're not all the same audiences. Yes, Soups and Fantastic Four is. And I think if you draw a Venn diagram, you're going to have a good number of people who are going to see all four of those. But you're also going to have a good number of people that see two or one. You know, I'm not necessarily a Jurassic Park fan. My stepson? Yeah, we'll go with that. Braden loves Jurassic Park. He's going to go see it. Now, he likes Marvel movies. He'll probably go see those. Know What I Did Last Summer? Nah. Then I know some horror people that's the big one for them. That's the one they've been waiting for. So, no, I don't see that being a problem. Now, if it was superhero, then yeah, you might have a problem. But you've got 2 weeks of one of them and then a solid 2 weeks of the other. And if they're good, people are going to keep going. So yeah, I don't see a problem with that. And I look forward to both of them doing really well. Let's see, I'm not a JP fan either, but that last movie broke $1 billion. I just wondered, with all the competition, if it may lower opening weekend takes. See, I don't. Maybe. I was going to say I don't think it will, but it really depends on what happens with the economy in the next month or two. If we can keep from going into a recession, if we can get some of this turned around, then I think people are going to go see the movies they love. It's a distraction. When you turn on the news and you see bad news after bad news after bad news, you want to watch something else. That's why people are watching TikTok and all these other things and streaming services. Now, the days of giant blockbusters may be done. Maybe none of them break $1 billion. Maybe the number of movies that are going to break $1 billion have really become rare. You know, your Barbies, your Minecraft, whatever it is. But I think these movies will still do well. And if Superman gets in the 700-800 million range, that's a hit. That's fine. If Fantastic Four gets in the 700-800 range, I think Marvel will be happy with that. Well, do they want $1 billion? Of course they want $1 billion. But you're looking at the fact that there might not be a Chinese market, and that's a good amount of money. So that could hurt. There's a lot of possibilities that could keep it down, but I think it really has to look at a combination of the money, the legs, and the opinions. And it's tough because Superman is going to get a lot of negative feedback from the Snyder people, which is a shame. Because at some point you have to stop and go, we may love Snyder's movies, but they're not coming back. And either we support the next iteration or we're not going to have Superman movies. We're not going to get Batman movies. So, do you love the characters or just Zack Snyder? And I don't believe that that Zack Snyder is necessarily where all the love is, because movies like Rebel Moon are tanking. His other stuff, it's not like they're taking off like crazy. Even the movies he didn't do great. None of his movies broke $1 billion. Aquaman did. The first Wonder Woman did. None of the others. Nothing that he did on his own did. So, if they're good movies and it's good word of mouth, people will go see it. But there's also has to be a decision by the internet content creators that they're in the tear it down phase. They built their empires on raising Marvel and DC up. And now they're keeping their empires going by tearing them down. But there's going to get to a point where you tear it down so far that no one's going to watch your videos anyway. If they stop caring about Superman movies, why would they click on a report, whether it's positive or negative? So at some point, the content creators who somewhere, a while back realized that negative headlines get more clicks have to be seeing diminishing returns at this point and realize they need to start being more fair and balanced and hyping the good again. So let's see. One last question. Have you heard anything about them canceling the Batman sequel? It is not being canceled. That is not happening. Gunn has said that there's some good news on it. Matt Reeves has not left the project. It is still in the works, and it doesn't even need to start pre-production until October to be out for 2027. It needs a 2-year window, a year of pre-production, and they can probably cut that down, and a year of production. Well, yeah. So as long as they're in pre-production by like October, November, they can start filming in 2026 and then finish up by the winter and then start all that other stuff to get it ready for, yes, it's still perfectly in sync. So I wouldn't, until you hear James Gunn say it's canceled, don't think it's canceled. At this point, just stop listening to the reports. They're just getting you to click. And what's sad is I don't think people are even clicking those things anymore. They read the headlines and move on and just go, oh, Matt Reeves is leaving. When you read the actual article, you go, that's a pretty flimsy thing to say about that. But if you don't read the article, you don't realize how flimsy their information is. So, all right, that is my hour. I hope you guys liked me rambling on about Superman. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the likes. If you're on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. I'm going to try to start creating some more content. With the success of the Penguin, I can't imagine them canceling all of that. No, they're going to keep it going. Even if they do have to change directors, but I don't think they will. I don't think they'll have to. So I'm going to start trying to do more content, maybe get back to the psychology stuff. I am still working on Obsidian Moon. I've got 2 solid chapters of the new fog book done. That's the first part of Obsidian Moon. So when I get to 10, I'll turn it over to the editor for the first part and move on to the second act and go from there. And once I kind of got rolling, it'll go a lot faster. So here's open. All right, guys, take care. Have a great Sunday night, and I'll see you during the week. And maybe a crochet show. Actually, you know what? I've got a gift box that I was given that's how to crochet a little Spider-Man figure. Has all the pieces in it. Maybe I'll do that as a live stream one day. We'll figure it. But if I do, I'll let you know way in advance, Ted. All right, you guys. Take care. Love you all. Have a great one.